Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lit Happens. Belle here. Adrielle, how are you going?
I'm good, Bill. I'm going well.
Well done. That's so good. We thought we'd introduce to our listeners a new segment, so a bit of a new format for today's episode. We're going to be introducing a new segment called Teacher Talks, where we sift through some questions from fellow teachers and also perhaps some questions that students might have shooting our way. And we just thought this might be a nice opportunity to have a yarn like you and I always do. We never run out of things to talk about. And also maybe, think about that question, have a think about some things we have done and maybe offer some suggestions for our fellow listeners. So a bit of a new format, but we're really excited for our new Teacher Talk segment, and we hope that you all love it out there. So what do you think, Adriel? We're going to get into it today. What do you think about this new
I think
segment?
so. It'll be good. It'll be good. I think it's good to sort of unpack a few of the questions that we as teachers might have, and then in particular the students might have about the teaching profession and some of the myths and the theories and whatnot. We can hopefully bust them. It's a bit like that MythBusters show that used to be on TV a while
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, that
I
was a
think
great
so.
show.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a pretty good
Right,
show.
sounds good.
It's funny. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's still on because I barely watch TV anymore or these days, but
yeah.
yeah, it's one of those interesting ones where we'll just sort of speak from our experiences and see what we can go through.
See how we go. See if it sounds good. This might be a big win or a huge flop. We won't know until we've done it. So
That's right.
let's get into it then. So, well, we're going to start with our first question of Teacher Talks today, and this is one that we've received from students before, and one that I'm sure teachers hear all the time for their students. They say, "I study for English, but my marks don't improve. What am I doing wrong?" Now, initial thoughts on this question, Adriel, like this is, I think if I had $1 for every time I heard a
Yeah,
student say this, I'd have
yeah.
probably several
It's
thousands of dollars. One of those
you might
things,
be pretty
right?
rich. Yeah, that's true. I might be
Mm.
pretty wealthy by then. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting
Might
one.
be
I
paying for
guess.
this podcast.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We probably won't need to do the podcast or teach. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
Who knows?
but I think when we're looking at a question like this or along these lines, it has to go back down to the study pattern. So, like, what do you consider
Mm.
study to be? Um,
Mm-hmm.
is study something that you'd study for an hour intensively before your assessment is due? Is study something
Mm-hmm.
that comes to mind whenever you receive an assessment, maybe that 2 weeks notification
Mm-hmm.
period, or
Mm-hmm.
is study something that is a life practice, a life routine? And I think when we start to get to that last sort of dot point there that I've just mentioned, you're starting to get warmer as to where the improvements actually happen. But if you're in the first two boats there, you're probably going to continue to ask
Yeah,
yourselves, what am I doing wrong? And I mean, this is a life lesson as well.
absolutely.
It's a life lesson. I've learned this quite a bit, and as I've mentioned in some of our episodes prior, like I'm studying at the moment, and it's funny when I think back on how I was through high school, let alone university, and I'd ask the same question. I studied, I read everything, and then I look back at my processes now, and I'm just thinking, well, really, I wasn't studying intentionally. It was more just studying in order to get something done. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that perspective that lots of students will need to consider. And we'll get to the nitty gritty, obviously, things, but I think the first thing is your perspective, your mindset. It's like, what is study? And are you being truly intentional with your study when it comes to English? Because remember, English isn't
Yeah,
just a subject where you have to remember your notes or just remember the quotes or just be able to retell or regurgitate things about the text. That's one component of a bigger picture, which is
true,
all about the skills. So it's like where we
true.
learn, we practice the skills over and over again, and by the time we get to an exam or an assessment task, those skills are so innate that they become second nature to you. And that's when we generally see the improvements. And this is something as we do get older, you start to see and understand a little bit more. But from the more successful sort of students, let's say, for example, we're talking about senior English here. As just an example, but it's applicable to all of the stages here in high school. But let's say a student starts studying for a year 12 assessment 2 weeks before an assessment task, but then you compare that to someone who has been studying since the beginning of year 11, where they've got all the foundational skills, or they've started working on essay writing at an earlier time, even
Mhm.
before teachers have told you, "Hey, let's go out. I need you to go and write this essay." They've gone out, they've shown initiative, they've started reading scholarly material, they've started to practice their craft, that craft which is writing, in particular.
Mhm.
Then we start to see
Mhm.
those marks improve on a more consistent trajectory. Your marks could be pretty good if you fluke it. This is what I used to have when I was back in high school. But look, one of the big things that I'm mentioning is like, what am I doing wrong? Well, are you intentional in what your study routine and pattern is? Have you set yourself goals? These are the first questions that I would ask myself. And then number three is consistency. Like, are we too busy looking at all the trends and the ins and outs of studying what it is, but
True.
we just look at it rather than applying it? So we have to be
Yeah.
consistently applying study routines and patterns in order to improve. Yeah, it's one of
Yeah.
those interesting
Absolutely.
things because English is, like you said, skills based. It's not a theory based subject. But yeah, those are some of the tips that I would
You know,
give. And yeah,
yeah, no, the thing that I think when I hear this question is automatically it makes me think of the other question we often get is like, well, how are we even meant to study for English? You can't study for English, you know? It's like I think when you said before that idea of intentionality, that is like the biggest thing. Like if I can give an example of a student who was saying these things and getting themselves worked up and is in a tizzy because it
mm,
is frustrating, right? When you're the student
yeah,
and you're trying and you think you're trying and you're just not getting anywhere. And
yeah,
so the thing that I noticed with them was the way that they were studying was the way that somebody who had scored really well told them that they study. And so what
mm,
this student had gone is, oh, well, I just need to do that
yeah,
and then my marks should go from 15 out of 20 to 18 out of 20 or
yeah,
whatever. You know?
yeah.
And the thing is, I'm like, yeah, but you are not that person. You don't write
That's
like that
true.
person. You don't think like that person. And that's not
Yeah.
a criticism. That's true of each and every one of us. No two people study the same way, think the same way,
Mm,
write the same way. I mean, sure, like you said, there are steps and strategies and things that we know generally that will help and work. But I feel like a lot of students, when they talking about this idea of studying, they're
yeah.
not really clear on what they mean by studying for English. It's not just I'm going to
Mm,
read my notes and write a summary. It's that practical stuff, isn't it?
that's right.
And I was
Yeah.
saying to that students was describing to me, and then the student does this and the student does that. Okay, how would you do that then? Give me
Yeah.
an example of you following that. And then you'd
Yeah.
hear crickets. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
because you're not there yet. Maybe one day that can be your study routine or style. But
Yeah.
I think those students, they often think they're going to jump from A to Z and they're just going to skip everything in between. But
Mm.
do you have any anecdotes or examples of students that you recall coming up to you go, "Sir, I'm studying and nothing's changing." Like, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah, any
Yeah,
examples?
you sort of touched a little bit on that right there, where you said,
Mm,
we live in this age where we're always just comparing and where we're always looking at
yes, true.
that quick fix sort of
Mm,
generation,
mm,
and it's more so prevalent now than even maybe in our generation or even years before. But I think one of the key things there is like you just said, the students will do all the research on how to, like, they've got all the access to the information. We've got it,
mhm,
with our computers now, and it's there at the touch of a button now. Everything's AI or moving or transitioning towards that now, and
true.
it's got its practical sort of benefits as well. We're not here sort of speaking down on it and then talking about how we can't use it to benefit our lives. However, the students will just
Mhm,
use it as a band-aid solution because they haven't put in the
yeah,
proper preparation. Or
mhm,
what they call study is typing something in a quick Google sort of search rather than being intentional in reading academic journals, in maybe writing a response. Like, I remember one of my students, he'd write an essay, and you'd go in and it'd be pretty good to start off with, and you're like, all right, so what do you need to improve on? I said, well, this is perfect. I worked on it once, and I worked on it like 6 hours, and this should be
yeah.
the
This
good
should
sort of
be
thing.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, but
should be A plus.
again, that's right.
Yeah,
This is my 20. It's
process.
like students will come up to you and they'll be like, "Oh, can you just tell me what mark would this get?" And we're like, "Well, it's not
Yeah,
as
that's
simple
tough.
as that,
Yeah.
isn't it?"
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
because again in English we're looking at how well your writing is development. Like one of the cool things about like a student like that is you can sort of say, well, hey, you could what you're doing is you're just throwing darts at a board and hoping that they stick at the moment.
Yeah.
Whereas that person
True.
that puts in the practice, puts in the hours, puts in the reps, when it comes to their studying of the skill and the application of the skill, you're you're definitely going to be in with a greater chance of improving your marks. Now, improvement doesn't mean I guess this is the other misconception that we get with marks in English is I studied so hard that I moved from a 10 to a 12. Okay,
Mhm.
that's improving marks. You know, kids will look at that and be like, but I'm
Yes.
still only in the C range. Like, and
Yeah.
then they forget to see those little baby steps that you have made. And this is honestly the biggest thing for me is, you know, win those little victories. When you celebrate those little victories, you don't just stop. You continue to
Yes.
build on those victories. And then I think for English in particular, you're always building. You're always. I mean, I'm still learning today some of the ways in which
Totally.
I express myself in essays when I'm doing them for uni
Mhm.
assessments. And these are the
Mhm.
things that we're continually learning. And I think studying for English isn't just about marks, it's about making sure you're refining and honing in those skills,
Yes.
and naturally
Mhm.
then your marks will make those, you know, general incremental improvements which you're going to start to see. So I think for me, like that what am I doing wrong thing goes back to that perspective, you know. And yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. So then, like, if we're moving towards some practical suggestions and strategies, I know you started touching on some for the students. Like, I think one thing that I often say is you're not just going with the intent of rereading your notes. Yes, you do have to, of course,
Mm,
rote learn that information, but then you need to, I always say to them, then you need to move on from the I've remembered them, I've understood them. Now I'm going to apply them. Like, okay,
yeah,
you know, you've memorized your purpose, audience, and context information for your select text for study. What are you going to
yeah,
do with them now? Is that just going to sit as info? Are you going to try and
yeah.
turn them now into well written sentences? Are you
Mm,
then going to connect them? Are you then going to use those sentences to try and do a bit of a mock introduction? Are you perhaps going to start writing those sentences out and seeing what evidence follows and sort of work on
yeah.
the building blocks of analysis? Like, it's all about what you're doing with your notes. And I do get it for students that they get quite
Mm,
confused between, well, I do this in science, right? And it
yeah.
works. And I do this in maths and it works. And then I come to English, and I think it's really hard for them to understand
Mm,
English is very subjective in nature. Like, yes, you have a
yeah.
marking criteria, but when I say subjective, your answer is never, ever going to be the same. You could approach the
Yeah.
same essay question, right,
Yeah.
3 different times within a week, and your
Yep.
answer will always be different and nuanced because that's the nature of the subject. And
Yeah.
one thing that I often say is like, well, I'll have students who will, you know, when like they're in year 12, for example, and they're
Mm,
doing like they're doing their kind of recap of everything before their
yeah.
trial exam and before their HSC,
Yeah.
and they'll look back at whatever essay they wrote in term one, and they'll look now, and often, like, what you want to
Mm,
hear is a student
mm,
say, oh wow, like, look how much better my ideas are now, look how much
yeah.
clearer my writing is, like,
Yeah.
this is 50,000 times better than my first one. That's, I think, the thing that students think they're not studying for English, but they're not realizing every step counts, every word builds.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they necessarily go back and compare. Like, sometimes when I want to give a kid confidence, I'll say, go back and find something you wrote last year. Then go back and
Mm,
find what you wrote the year before. You tell me if there's been no difference or no improvement. I think because it's not so tangible as a, I got the mark or I didn't get the mark or it was 100% correct and not,
yeah.
they sometimes feel like they're not
Yeah.
studying. Yeah, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, 100%. And then it's just this, it's mindset. Like I said, you don't get instant gratification.
Mm,
We live in an age, like I said, it's such short attention spans. They expect to study for 7 minutes and have 70 hours or days worth of knowledge retention and application within that 7 minutes of study that they might do. You know, it's always like, what's the quick way? What's the path of least resistance? And you can't
yeah.
with so many different things. Like you just have to be real. in the sense that it's a process. It takes time, and I think studying for English in particular, kids neglect the fact that it's the skill as opposed to the theory or the content that you just need to
True,
regurgitate. I think that's
true.
probably the big one. I think there was a document that was put up on one of my colleagues currently shared it recently on the one of the teacher groups, and it was like, how do you write a stage six essay or band six, sorry, stage six essay? And one of the key points in the document that stood out from this teacher that wrote it or developed it was often kids in senior school don't realize that the kids that are scoring those high band six marks are the ones that have started working at the beginning of year 11. They don't wait till
Absolutely.
year 12
Absolutely.
or the trials to start writing their essays, or wait till their teacher holds their hands along the way and says, hey, I need you to do this, or they take that initiative. They have a routine in place. They understand what works for them, because as you've mentioned, there are many approaches to studying in English. Some people will remember things, like you might have a photographic memory and you might remember things in quotes, and yes, it's going to be easier for you to remember quotes, but what
Yeah,
if you have a problem with translating, the application of those quotes, and that's what you would then
true.
practice, like whereas
Yes.
others might struggle with remembering quotes, but they have a nice natural written expression, and then their goal will be, well, what quotes are applicable to support some of these great ideas that I'm putting forth. So there's no one
Mm,
size fits all shoe for
mhm,
studying
mhm.
and improving in English, but
Yeah,
I think if we
yeah,
understand the skills of routine, of setting yourself a plan, what are your goals, looking at those little
yeah,
wins, and also being consistent over a
yeah.
sustained period of time, I think that's where you're going to start to
Mhm.
see your marks improving. You may improve, like I
Absolutely.
said, out of luck, because you might be naturally gifted, but that won't be a sustained improvement, and that's where you'll start to
Yeah,
feel like you do. What
totally.
am I doing wrong? And you're doing wrong part
Totally.
is your skills and your application, I guess,
Mm.
to study.
And
I think that's a
I
big
I
thing.
find as well, I think you're so right, and I just find lastly, when they're saying, "What am I doing wrong?" Have you noted your teacher's feedback? Because
Mm,
often the feedback of your work or the feedback of your assessment, the feedback of your in-class effort, your in-class participation, that is often what you need to study. And I feel
mm,
like, how many times do you know of teachers, and I myself have said it, I'm sick of wasting my time. It's not
yeah,
maybe a waste of time, but it feels like a waste of my time when I'm writing all this feedback down and I see that the kid doesn't even read it. And what's the
yeah,
point?
yeah,
I may as well
yeah,
just put a mark. As English teachers, we don't want to do that. It's all about improvement. We want to give that
yeah,
feedback. But I think students here take that ownership too. Look at your feedback, take it on board, then look at what you can practically do. And then I'm sure if you go and you speak to your teacher, I'm trying to do this, this is my goal. What
yeah,
what are some things? Your teacher will give you a couple suggestions and point you in the right direction, and then the rest will be up to you. But your teacher will always give you that guidance.
yeah,
And feedback comes in everything, verbal, written. I even say
mm,
to my guys, because I tutor some students as well, and I say to them, well, take note of what your teacher is discussing in that lesson, because if they're taking a particular focus on a certain skill, the likelihood
yeah,
is you're all not doing it that great. Like there's a reason, like in the
yeah,
stacked syllabus, your teachers are going to look at what your students' strengths are, where the weaknesses are, and
yeah,
correctly assess that, and then kind of guide that and teach to that within their lessons. So there's feedback,
yeah,
I think, to be found everywhere for students, but you have to be conscious of it. And then I love what you said as we started this, you have to be really deliberate about it.
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
that's some good, nice pointers for that one for
Mm,
students. Let's move
mm,
into our last question of the episode then. This is very much more teacher directed question here. So
mm,
what we've got is, I'll just scroll up to my question, Adriel. Here it is. There we go. How do you teach a text you secretly hate? Oh, that's a good one. That's a really,
mm,
really great question. Uh, because it's really funny when, like, I've definitely heard of teachers who go, oh, I genuinely dislike Shakespeare. Like,
yeah,
I disliked them as a kid. I disliked them in uni. They say I dislike them now. But you still have to teach them, right? And I feel like if the students know you hate it, they're just going to hate it too. They're going to jump on
yeah,
that bandwagon, right?
yeah,
Like that's what I think. I feel like
yeah,
if you explicitly say to your kids, I hate this too, they're probably going to hate it. So I can always think of like one thing that I know you would always say, and it was something that I embedded in my teaching, that idea of appreciation, right?
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
idea of, I'm not going to tell the kids I hate the text, but I
Yeah.
might acknowledge why it's a difficult text or why it might be
Yeah.
difficult to access. But then I'm going to harp on this. Well, this is what I appreciate it, and try and get
Mm,
them to
mm,
like get on board a bit. Yeah. What are your first
yeah.
thoughts of that
Yeah.
question?
I 100% agree. I remember teaching a comparative study for year 10 once, which was between Emma and Clueless. Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to offend a
Yeah.
lot of Jane Austen lovers here at the
An
moment,
acquired
but
taste.
it's just not my cup of tea. Let's put it that way. I think
Hey, that was
the
very
genre,
diplomatic. That was very
yeah.
diplomatic of you, Adrian. You could offend anyone with that. That was the nicest way you could
I,
have said
I think
that.
but just as anything, like some things just aren't your cup of tea. But in saying that, as
Mm,
you've just mentioned, you can't deny the fact that Jane Austen is not a fantastic writer, and the
mm,
skills in which she
mm,
develops her pieces of work is truly amazing.
mm,
And you can sort of see
mm.
the difference here in terms of that perspective. And I remember reading through Emma, and again, I do not engage with that type of genre as well as probably
Yeah.
others would. Um,
Yeah.
it was a struggle reading it initially for me. But as you sort of
Mhm.
get into the text, oh my goodness! Like, I mean, recently I started reading Gatsby again, and we would have heard in like one of our episodes recently. The more I sort of speak about it, the more I start to understand the way in which Fitzgerald constructs that text. Oh my goodness, it's amazing.
Mhm.
Every single
Mhm.
sentence
Mhm.
in that text is just so rich and full of imagery and full of power and
Mhm.
full of just so much influence. And you're just like, okay. And that word appreciation comes to mind. It's very, very important as a teacher not to just say, well, this is boring. Let's just try and get through it and we'll see you at the end of the term. Like, if you were to do that, you've already lost your kids. Whereas
Yeah.
if you can sort of connect with your students and get them to understand that, yes, we might not appreciate all genres, but we can look at the beauty of how a text and why a text is constructed. I think distinguishing the study of text in English is very, very important as well. It's like, remember, you're coming to English not necessarily for entertainment. We're looking at why and how ideas are presented by specific authors for their purpose and
Mm.
their didactic intent. So if we understand
Mhm.
purpose, that
Yeah.
makes the teaching of that text, no matter how much you may not enjoy it, or this word hate is quite strong, but you might not engage, or you hate it, as we're sort of
Yeah,
talking about
that's
here.
okay. That's fine too.
Um,
We all have preferences. Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
So, and we also like, I'm not gonna lie, there are a lot of texts on the new HSC prescription text
Yeah,
list, sorry, that I don't love, and some that I quite hate and would hate teaching them. But
yeah, that's right.
sometimes we have to do what we have to do, right?
Oh, exactly right. But yeah, it goes back to that
Mm,
mindset. Like, if you're going in with that horrible mindset with teaching something, what do you expect your kids to have? You know,
yeah,
it's
true.
you got to play
Yeah,
that game
that's
as a
true.
teacher. You've got to
Yeah,
play
because
that
you're
game, and you
modeling
have
for them. Yeah.
yeah, exactly right. And you also have to make sure, like, find the links. If you find it boring, like,
Mm,
well, try and make links as to, like, well, how can you make this applicable to not only your study content and skills, but make it relevant to their lives. Like, I think that's
mm,
super important for us to consider as well when it comes to our study of text, that we might not like. We're not in it for the business of entertainment. We're in it for the business of
yeah.
education. And I
Yeah.
think that is probably one of those profound ways in which we can shift our mindsets into teaching some of these texts. Um,
Yeah.
I can challenge all teachers to just think this as well, especially in the field of English. There are some days where we go in thinking, "Oh my goodness, like, how am I gonna teach this to a bunch of kids that don't wanna learn a musical?" For example. Like, I remember teaching
Ye
the musical. You would have remembered this. I used to love teaching Jimmy Choo's, not not the perfume dude, but, the musical director,
the
Jimmy Choo.
stiletto guy.
Yeah, that's right. But I used to as part of one of our studies that we had. I think it was year 9 or 10 on it. And I used to teach voice classes, as you said, like
Mm,
all the behavior sort of
mm,
kids. And it
Yes.
was a text called Brand New Day, music. And by the
Oh,
end of it, I
yes.
had them all dancing around and watching and wanting to sing the songs in the musical, and not only understanding, different bits and pieces of the text itself, but also understanding that like it's relevant to them, the ideas that were presented through it. Now, one of the most fantastic parts of that study was the fact that, it taught this beautiful message at the end where it doesn't matter where you're from, in this day and age where everyone is so divisive as to, different walks of life and et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. And like I said,
True.
I had um, an interesting bunch of students over multiple years. I taught it with multiple students. This text I love teaching, but the kids didn't necessarily like it. It's like, well,
Mhm. Mhm.
how do you find that common ground? How do you make it interesting to them? And I'd often be teaching through narrative. I would often be teaching through that life application. Like, what are the things that are relevant in our worlds? And those are some of my tips anyway for teaching
Yeah.
one of those texts. What about
No, I
yourself?
think they're great. No, I think yeah, I think your suggestions are really great there because you're right. Like we do come across those, like when we had those like literacy classes and very boy heavy
Mm,
classes, we used to teach that novel. I think it was called Hatchet. Who was the
yeah.
author? Paul, like a wilderness story, and
Mm, mm,
like again, not something I would read. I actually think it's quite a good text, but it's not something I would read. It's about a boy in the
mm,
wilderness. I am the least wilderness person you could find. I didn't know what half the tools he was talking about meant. I didn't know what half the things they were talking about in the novel meant. And like I had a very disengaged group of boys where, who struggle with literacy trying to read this. In saying that it's quite an easy read, but then I was like, well, I have to hook them and myself somehow. So then I started doing like survival games, like little group
yeah.
things. Like if you're stuck, do you do option A? Like I found a quiz that was all about how likely you would be to survive based on the
Yeah.
questions you chose. And that was a lot of fun because I was like, well, clearly, guys, with my answers, I'd be dead in 10 minutes. And they thought that
Yeah.
was hilarious. I don't know whether that
Yeah.
was them connecting or secretly wishing something upon
Yeah.
me. I don't know. But then, like, it was nice because then we could tap into the kids, and the kids started telling me about what they do when they go camping and this
Mm, mm,
strategy and that strategy. And then we started watching a bit of the Bear Grylls stuff, which
yeah.
obviously who's not going to be entertained by that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think exactly what you said, where you try and find something, you try and tap into something, and that makes
Mm,
it palatable for you and like
yeah.
palatable for the kids. For me, I always try and go back to something real life in
Yeah.
whatever the text is. If there's something that I can show them or teach them or that we can watch or listen to, I always feel like that's a really solid
Mm,
way to go. But I think it is also good for us sometimes to teach things we don't love because it's a
yeah.
good example to students that, like you
Yeah.
said, you're not going to always be entertained. Like,
Yeah.
if you go to university, there will be
Mm,
topics you're doing and things you're studying and lecturers and tutors that you're not enjoying, that you secretly
yeah.
would rather, would just axe if you could, if you had that option.
Yeah.
And similarly, I'll say to the guys like, well, whenever, and they'll say, oh, but I haven't picked this one day if I'm going to be I don't know, electrician. So yeah, but there's always going to be something that you don't love about that. There's always
Yeah.
something in this world that is not made purely for us and does not align
Mm,
for us. And I guess part of that real life skill is
yeah.
trying to engage as best you can, appreciate the value with it, and
Mm,
get through it. And so I think
yeah.
sometimes that in itself is a really good lesson to the kids.
Yeah.
And then I know when I say to them at the end, like, that was a really big novel, like that was
Mm,
really hard to analyze and do all that, but like we did it, didn't we? Did we
yeah.
finish it? Did we not finish it? And they would
Yeah.
say, oh yeah, I guess we did. And so I'd be like, how proud is that? How good is that
Yeah.
that you stuck through something that you
Yeah.
didn't enjoy, but it wasn't a waste of your time because you made
Mm,
sense and meaning out of it.
mm,
And I think that's like one of those things with English where we inadvertently teach them all these
yeah.
fantastic little life lessons through text that we don't necessarily like and
Yeah.
appreciate. I mean,
Yeah.
because you do work in schools sometimes where you don't. I know at one of the schools that you and I worked at, we
Mm.
had a lot of choice in terms of what text we taught, and therefore we could
Yeah.
be very deliberate with our classes. But I know I've also worked at schools where the text is set for everybody because the
Mm.
resources are set for everybody. And so
Yeah.
inevitably you're going to find topics and text types that you are not going to enjoy. But I think, like you said, the approach to everything is what matters. Not
Yeah.
just to get you through the day, but to get your students to have accomplished something and learned something. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so I think then, Adriel, like when we're looking at these questions, it's that acknowledgement of, English is not an easy subject. It's not a subject that is fun for everyone. It's not like your PE where virtually every kid's like, I love PE, I get to be
Mm.
outside. And
Mm.
like, yeah, it's one of those subjects that everyone has to work towards, student and teachers alike. And so, yeah, I
Mm.
hope that our listeners have enjoyed like some of our suggestions here and some of our thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts in our very first Teacher Talks episode, Adrielle?
Honestly, like just go out and enjoy your teaching. It's a privilege to be able to teach, and as we're looking at this, English definitely is one of those, like you just said, more of those subjectively likable subjects
Mm,
for some of our students in this day and age. But again, we make it what it is for the students as teachers, and we sort of keep that engagement going. I can use the analogy of like that chessboard. You're always looking at what's the next
mm,
move that our students or our generation is going to be coming through with, and you as a teacher, it's what makes it fresh. It's one
yeah.
of the privileges of the vocation where you're not just sitting behind a computer desk or just doing the motion like over again. It's what makes this job both challenging but also very enjoyable as well. So I think those are
Mm,
definitely hopefully some beneficial things that we've spoken about today, both
yeah.
for students and teachers alike. Yeah.
Totally. So, moral of this episode is variety is the spice of life, I think.
Yeah.
And just good to like when you're pushing through and it's like Thursday, period 5, and you're like, I hate this text. Everyone hates
Yeah.
this text. Just hopefully, like some little tidbits to help push you through and
Yeah.
remind you, like, we're doing everything we can. We're embedding these kids with wonderful life skills and life
Mm.
lessons. And yeah, we hope, I guess, listeners, that you have enjoyed our Teacher Talks episode and give us some feedback. If you'd like to hear some more, please send us through any questions that you would like us to discuss and maybe not really answer for you, but we'll give you some good stories anyhow. So that's always a bit of a win. We've always got
Yeah.
things to say, don't we, Adrielle? Yeah.
Yeah, always different things to say, and it's one of those
Mm,
new sort of eps for us where we're just looking at a few different ideas and ways into the teaching vocation. So, yeah, 100%.
mhm. Thanks, everyone, so much for listening to our very first official Teacher Talks episode. Keep an eye out for more coming along in our weekly episodes. We're still going to be talking about all things English text. We know that we've got a lot of momentum for that. People are really enjoying those and really craving those as a bit of in your ear, quick sort of, PL and insight. So those are still coming. Keep an eye out for Teacher Talks. Keep an eye out also for our Teacher Diary segment episodes that are going to be coming out soon, where you can hear through the voice of a teacher, not Adriel or myself, and brand new, fresh interviewee.
Yeah,
And they're going to give us, their own very varied insights and experiences in the teaching world. And so we hope that you are enjoying everything we're putting out. Keep giving us that feedback. Let us know. Please keep engaging with us, and we can't wait to connect with you guys and get another episode out for you guys to listen to us very soon. All right, all the best. Take care.